Right, so moving on to other form widgets, we have the Fieldset and Legend widgets, elements, and these are used to group a set of widgets that share the same purpose. It's used for styling and semantic purposes, and the legend element is used to describe a field set. So suppose we want to group a couple of elements together. We can do that. Let's say we wanted to group name, email, and date into one category. So we do that by using the Fieldset widget. So let's say Fieldset, right? We have both opening and closing tags. And let's bring all this, that is the name, email, and date, inside the Fieldset. Right? If I save that, you see that we get it in a box. Now we can provide a name for this Fieldset by using the legend element. So let's say legend, and we'll call this user details. Save that, and this is how you use Fieldset and legend. So it's used to group a couple of elements together. We have drop-down menus. Now the purpose of a drop-down and why it's such a great widget is that it allows the user to select from several options, and these several options don't have to be displayed on the page, taking up the space. So when the user clicks on the drop-down menu, it'll expand into an interface in which all the options will be displayed. And when he focuses out of it, the expanded menu collapses. So this helps to save a lot of space. Let's see how we can work with this. The drop-down element uses an element called select. Let's have a look at that. After quantity, we wanted to set up a drop-down menu. We'll just say select. If I save this, you see that a drop-down menu appears, but there's nothing inside it. So first of all, let's give it a label. We'll call this model. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Because it's related to the data that we're going to put inside. Now we have a drop-down menu, but we don't have any content inside it. So we do that by using the options element. And the option element specifies each option for the drop-down. Let's do that. So as you can see, the select tag has both opening and closing tags. So inside it, we'll provide a couple of options. So let's say option, and we'll add this. We'll say item 1. So you can see item 1 appears. There's only one element. We can add several more of these. Let's add 3 more of these. So I'm going to say 2 and 3. Save that. Now you can see that the user has an option to select and browse through several options, but at the same time, all those options are not displayed on the page, and hence this saves space. So that's how the drop-down menu works. The drop-down menu can be accessed by using the select element. Next, we have radio buttons. You might have seen this on many forms, in several forms. Now, this radio button element ties several buttons together into one group and allows the user to select only one of the options, one of the radio buttons. So it's characterized by its tiny circular button shape, right? It has a couple of attributes that it can go through, like the name attribute is what makes several radio buttons part of one group, right? So we'll add a break, right? And we'll call this label, let's say, we'll call it levels, right? Levels, let's say. In order to use a radio button, you'd use the input tag. Input type is equal to radio. If I save that, you see a radio button appears. Now we can add a label after this. Okay, that says label, and we'll call this level full, right? And then we can copy this a couple of times. So we have one radio button that says full, that will have a label called full. We'll have another radio button that says mid, and we'll say we have another radio button that says basic. Save this, and you see we end up with radio buttons. Now the entire point of a radio button is that it should allow the user to select only one option. But at this point, you can see that we can select all of them. Because right now, they're not part of one group. In order to group them, you have to give them all the same group name. And that group name can be specified by using the name attribute. So we say name is equal to, we'll call this level. And we do the same thing for the other one. Name is equal to level. Name is equal to level. Save this. And now you can see that we can select only one of them, because the point of a radio button is to be able to select only one among several options. And since all these buttons form part of the same group called level, it knows that you can select only one of these. Now there are a couple of more attributes that we can use in input, like we can set one of these labels. We can set one of these radio buttons on low to be checked by default. So you'd come into the input, and let's say we wanted the mid level to be checked by default. So we just add the Boolean attribute called checked. Now when the page loads, by default mid is selected. Now there's another attribute that we need to call, that I need to mention over here. And this must not be confused with label or ID. It's an attribute called value. So what the value attribute does is when a form is submitted, the value of the value attribute is what is sent to the server. Value is equal to full. So now what I'm saying here is that this radio button, its value is full. And what the label does is it represents this, it visualizes this so that the person knows what to select. It visualizes this on the screen, but the label is not the actual value of the button. So when I click submit on the form, if the radio button that's checked is full, the value of full is sent to the server for processing. It's not the label, and it's not the ID, it's the value. So for every radio button, you need to provide a value. So I say value is equal to mid, and I also say value is equal to basic. Visually, nothing is represented on screen except for the labels, but when you submit the form, the server knows, gets an actual value from this selection, from this group of radio buttons. Give this a field set. we'll move all these radio buttons inside this field set. Save that. There we go, that looks better. And let's give it a legend. And we'll call this the same thing. We'll call this levels or select level. There we go. So this is how we use radio buttons. There's another element like this called checkbox, and we'll cover that now. Now, the checkbox element is similar to the radio button, but it allows the user to select more than one option from a group of checkboxes. Now, this checkbox element is, of course, characterized by its tiny square box with a tick mark inside it when someone checks the box. Now, the checkbox, similarly to radio buttons, all checkboxes with the same identical name attribute form part of the same group. The value attribute will define the value of the checkbox, just like it does in radio buttons, like we just discussed. And you can check any number of checkboxes as default when we load the form. Let's have a look at input type checkbox. Quite similar to radio buttons, we'll set up checkboxes. Provide a break line. Say input type is equal to checkbox. Save it, and you should see a checkbox, and you can check it, uncheck it. Of course, we can provide a label after this. So let's say label, and we'll say, let's say feature 1, right? And let's copy this a couple of times. So we'll say 5 of them, or 4 of them. Checkbox, we'll say feature 2, feature 3, feature 4, feature 5. So you can see we end up with checkboxes that have feature 1, feature 2. Now all of these can be selected, okay? But we have a problem right now, just like radio buttons, where all of these right now are just individual. They don't form part of one group. So we do that once again by using the name attribute, and we give all of these checkboxes the same name to tell the browser that these are all part of the same group. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this simultaneously, because this is one of VS Code's features that I can write multiple lines simultaneously. So I'm just going to write name is equal to, we'll call this features, and we can save this. So all these form part of one group. Just like this, we can select multiple checkboxes to be set as default when the form is loaded for the first time. So we can call that, we'll keep the first one checked, and we'll keep the second one checked. When I save this, you'll see that when the form loads, feature 1 and feature 2 are selected. Now I can uncheck this. I can select other ones as well, just like we did for, so let's add values to all of them. Once again, I'm going to do all this simultaneously because it's just convenient. I'm going to set the value is equal to, I'm going to say feature 1, and then one by one I'm just going to change each one of them. 2, this is 3, this is 4, and this is 5. Save that, and everything should be okay. Once again, we can put this all inside of Fieldset. Let's take everything, move it inside, save it. There we go. And we can give this a legend called select features. There we go. So this is how we use radio buttons and checkboxes. we're going to structure this form just a little bit, and we have to another thing that we have to note is that you don't necessarily have to structure your forms just using field set and other stuff. You can actually do it using normal HTML sectioning elements like we've covered in previous lessons, like division, section. We can use paragraphs, we can use headers, we can use ordered list, we can use unordered lists. So let's try and do a little bit of that. Let's use a ordered list to put all these features in a list format. So what I would do for that is I would come into Legend, into the field set for Checkbox, and I'd say, let's make an unordered list. I'll provide lists. I'll provide 5 list items, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste each one of these checkboxes inside a list item. So this is how we're formatting our list, our form, sorry. So I take this input and I move it into that one. So I'm just going to do that again for all of these. Then I move this input and when I save it, now you see all these features are displayed in list items, and as you can see very clearly these list items are here because you can see these you can see the dots, and we can remove these. We can come into the CSS and just say, what is this? This is a field set. We'll give this field set a we'll give this field set not the field set, we'll give this UL an ID of features, right? So let's do that. We come in here, say features, and we can say list style type none. Save that. And you can see that all the dots are gone. And this I don't have to get into we don't have to get into the details of all this, but this is just for me to show you how we can actually structure stuff. Other than this, we can put this entire let's start from color. From color, we can move everything into a single division. We can say division, and let's move all of these except for the buttons inside the division. So we place it all inside the division, and we save it, and we'll give this an h2 called, let's say, customize. Save that. There we go. Let's customize. You can remove this. We'll give this division an ID or a class, let's say. Class is equal to customize. And then in our CSS, we can just simply say dot customize, and we can say border 1 pixel solid black. Save that. But something is wrong. Customize. There we go. We end up with a border, and we can set the background color to say Alice blue, whatever that is. There we go. So, I mean, of course, this is not the best customization. I'm just simply trying to show you what we can do. Coming up again, we can set up user details. Under the form, we can say this is, and provide an H1 that says car form. Okay, there we go, car form. And finally, we can customize each one of these elements to a very large degree, but that pretty much covers forms. So we talked about input type text, input type email, input type date, input type color, input type range. We talked about the select element, which does drop-down menus, and we talked about input type radio buttons, input type checkbox, text area, and the button element, which can be used through the input type is equal to submit, or button type is equal to submit, or the same thing even for reset. Alright, that pretty much does it for forms. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.